I woke up every day and I wanted to get high. I went to sleep every day and I wanted to get high. And I didn't just get addicted overnight. It was something that happened progressively over years. I probably started using in 5th grade summer, and I was introduced to opioids at the age of 15. And from there, my addiction progressed. And when I say progressed, I just mean that it got worse. So what I used became worse, how I used became worse, and what I had to do in order to keep using became worse. And it just totally consumed me, because in the beginning it seemed like drugs were fun, and I thought that they were the solution to all my problems. I thought that drugs were the life of the party, but really they were the death of the party. That's when I would lose the job, I would lose the car, and I would lose the place to stay, or I would find myself in jail for selling opioids, or prison, or on probation, on house arrest. I would find myself in detoxes, in rehabs, in psychiatric wards, and then I would get out of those places and I would go right back. And at first, I really never understood that drugs were part of the problem. And it wasn't until that I hit bottom for that last time that I really started to realize that drugs were definitely part of the problem. And so I remember laying there lifeless, paralyzed, not being able to move, and wondering if I could just get back up from the ground that I had just barreled through. And this was a place of complete darkness, hopelessness, desperation. And I just felt so completely helpless, because I knew drugs were part of the problem, but I couldn't quit using. And so it was in that place of complete darkness that I started to seek out an understanding of God. And I had been taught, things as a child growing up about who God was, but I had no real experience for myself, and anything that I had ever been taught was out the window by this point. But in that place of darkness, I knew that I needed something to help me, and I knew that it was bigger than just the drugs. And I knew that I had a spiritual problem, and I connected God with spirituality. And so what would give me hope was in that place of darkness, I would look out at the sky, and I would see the moon, and I would see the stars, and I would think to myself, whoever or whatever made those stars had to be good and could help me. Because how I come to the conclusion that whoever made those stars was good was the fact that those stars in that sky never failed me. So from the time that I was a little girl all the way up until that moment in time, even until now, I could go out at the same time every night and those stars would be there, and they would never change. And this was really important for me, because up until this point, everything in my life that I thought was good actually turned out to be evil, and everything turned on me. So just like I thought drugs were the solution to all my problems, and I thought they were this good thing in my life, they actually turned out to be the opposite. The man that I married, the drug dealer, I thought he was a good man, but then I would wake up one day to him saying, "Chasty, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," while reaching for his belt and counting to 3, or being put on the operating table. So it was really important for me that these stars never changed. And so it gave me hope that there was something bigger than me that could help me, and that was good. And so I continued to seek out that understanding, and I grabbed a hold of an understanding, and I put my faith in Christ, and something inside of me changed. And I gained some momentum. I was able to quit using the drugs for a little bit, but only for a little bit. And I started going to church. I started reading my Bible. I started studying. I went back home to my mom's, and I turned my closet into a prayer closet, and I just developed this relationship with Christ, and very intimate. But I still kept going back to my husband and the drugs, and I couldn't understand why. And every time I kept going back, I kept asking and I kept crying out to God, why? What do I need to do? And then that's when I felt like God was telling me to go to a 12-step program. I had been completely against it before because they used terms like higher power, God of my understanding, and I just thought that by going into those rooms that I would be opening up doors that I didn't need to be opened, spiritually speaking. But I went anyways, and they just genuinely looked out for my well-being without wanting anything in return. They didn't want money in return. They didn't want dope. They didn't want sex. They didn't want any of that. They just genuinely wanted to see me succeed and live a new life. And from there, I just started to take some of the suggestions that they gave me, and they told me don't use no matter what, and no matter what, don't use. And then they told me to get a sponsor, and they told me to start working steps with a sponsor, because they said that self-deception is hard to point out by yourself. And I just started chasing hope instead of chasing dope. And I started to apply the same effort that I used to find ways and means to get more drugs, to find ways and means to maintain my recovery. And so the same determination that I would use out on the streets when I would leave my mom's house walking a 45-minute drive, I took that same determination to find rides to go to meetings. And so I would go to meetings every day in the beginning. And the same trust that I would apply to either my ex-husband or other dope dealers, trusting that when I put money in their hand, they're going to come back with it, or they're going to give me some good dope whenever they come back and not flex me. I put that same trust in people in the program, like a sponsor and other recovering people. And I just started to grow, and I just started to live life. And I think the difference that has made in my recovery is community. And that's why I can never quit using before. Even when I had that intimate relationship with God and developing and cultivating that relationship, I was by myself. And I'll never forget this. I was in a meeting one night, and we were reading out of a pamphlet, and it said, it was named The Triangle of Self-Obsession. And in the pamphlet it said, we are given a new set of tools, and these tools are the 12 steps, and we use them to the best of our ability. And whenever we read that, I had a flashback of a memory of whenever I had went back to my ex-husband and I had reinitiated my use. And one of the cars that he actually sold so we could get some dope. And we were riding in this car, and because we sold the car, there was a girl driving it who bought it, and so I was in the passenger seat. And she was a tomboy, so she had put all her stuff in the car, like a toolbox and all kinds of different tools, stuff that you would normally see a man have. And she had it in the back seat and in the trunk, and well, we got a flat tire on the way to go get some dope. And so we pulled over at the store to fix this flat tire. And thankfully, she had the knowledge to change this tire, because I don't know how to change a tire. And she gets out, and thankfully she had the tools. And so she gets out, and she gets all the tools out of the trunk. She gets the wrench and all that. And then I'm just looking at her, and she's bent down on the side of the road in this parking lot, and she's gritting her teeth with this lug nut, trying to get this lug nut off of this tire. And she's saying, just turn back, teeth gritted and all. And in that moment, I went into this frantic panic, and I'm like, turn back to what? Turn back to God? Turn away from the drugs? And I realized how completely powerless and helpless I was in that moment. Not just I didn't know a thing about changing the tire and I couldn't help her, but how helpless I was over the state, over the condition that I was in, because here I was using drugs again after the millionth time that I said I would never do it again, and I'm right here stuck on the side of the road, literally and figuratively in life, stuck, not able to go anywhere. And then I come back to, and she had got the lug nuts off the tire, and then she had got the jack out, and she was trying to get the jack to lift the car up so she could get the tire off. And when she was doing that, she couldn't do it. She couldn't get that car to lift up. And so I had this idea. I said, I got an idea. She just looked at me. She didn't ask any questions, and she just stood there. I said, listen, I said, you stand on the jack. I said, then I'm going to stand on your boots, and I'm going to hug you, and then I'm going to jump with all my might. I said, and then we're going to get off, and you're going to do the same thing, vice versa. And so that's what we did. She got on there. I jumped on her boots. I hugged her. I jumped, and then we both got off, and then I got on, and we done the same thing. And through that strategic move, we were able to get that car to lift up. And then we were able to get the tire put on and get to where we was going. And so back to the meeting where I was remembering all this, that's where I realized why I was never able to stay quit, why I was never able to keep my momentum, is because I was trying to do it alone. That's why my relationship with Christ alone isn't sufficient. I need other people around me. I need community, because just like Lisa, my friend, she had the knowledge to change the tire. She had the tools to change the tire, but she still wasn't able to change that tire without me. She needed my help. And so in the same sense, I can have all the knowledge and all the tools, just like I did when I was in my closet reading my Bible and reading about the 12 steps. I can have all the knowledge and all the tools, but if I don't have other people, then I'm just going to stay stuck. And so community is so important for me to maintain my recovery today, and it's the main ingredient, besides Christ, of course, because he is the foundation, of how I maintain. Today, my life is completely changed. I am a productive member of society. I've had a job since 2016. My recovery date is August 1st, 2016. But I've also stepped into a career. I'm a North Carolina certified peer support specialist for the Olive Branch Ministry. I work in harm reduction. So I actually work with people who use drugs. And I'm a student at Gaston College pursuing a degree. But more importantly, more than all just like the material things, today I have joy, I have peace, I have hope. And before, the only hope that I had it was like a cloud. You look at it, and then you turn your head, and then you look back and it's gone. Poof, faded away. The joy that I had when I was using drugs was circumstantial. So 99.9% of the time, my circumstances weren't going the way that I planned. So you do the math. You can see how much joy I had. The peace that I had would only be for a moment, and then in a blink of an eye, it would be snatched away from me. But today, I can wake up and my peace never leaves. My joy never leaves, and my hope never leaves. And it doesn't matter what I go through in life, I can get through anything, and I don't have to use any dope because of it. And that means when my brother dies of an overdose, with just 4 months free myself, I don't have to use. When my car breaks down, I don't have to use. When my phone messes up, I don't have to use. And when my house burns down, I don't have to use. And even through those tragic situations that life brings, I can still have joy, and I can still have peace, and I can still have hope, all because I put down the dope.
So obviously your faith has impacted you a lot as far as getting the help you need, but who and I think you've already touched on this some, but who were some of the main people that kind of like pushed you to get help, and were, I guess, big factors you feel like in your life to help you get in recovery?
There's been a lot of people along the way. One of them in particular that I can think of is a lady named Becky. And she actually is in recovery from addiction as well. And she is a licensed addiction specialist. And how I met her was at a church that I started going to, and she played the piano there. And she played a significant role in my life. I remember specifically when I had 11 days free, my ex-husband sent me 3 messages, and one was a picture of him holding liquid morphine, which was my preferred drug of choice, in his hand. The second picture was a picture of a necklace, the Superman symbol in the shape of a diamond. And then the third picture was him holding a bag of morphine pills. And obviously he was trying to get me to come back through the drugs. And it was that day that I did something different. And instead of calling or replying back to him with those text messages, I reached out to 3 different people, and I sent out a text saying the same thing to all 3 people, and it was, "Pray for me right now, please." And when I sent that text message, I sent it to my preacher, I sent it to a praying mom, and then I sent it to Becky. Becky was the first person to reach back to me. Within seconds of me sending the text message, she immediately called. And as soon as I answered, she said, "Chasty, what's wrong?" And I went and told her, how I wanted to use. I told her about the pictures. And that day was definitely the day that changed the trajectory of my life. And when I explained to her how bad I wanted to use, she kind of just talked me through it. And she said, what is that scripture that you go around saying all the time? Because somebody told me to remember it. And I said, "There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful." And then she interrupted me and she said, "God is what?" I said, "God is faithful." She said, "That's right, Chastity. How many days do you have?" I said, 11. She said, "Wow." She said, "Do you know what this means?" And I don't even remember if I even said yes or what, but what I remember her replying is she said that this means progress. Chastity 2 weeks ago wouldn't have called and told me that Chastity was thinking about getting high. Chastity just went and got high. She said, "Where are you?" And I told her, and then that's when she said, "Can I come pick you up?" And I ended up telling her yes, and she got me that day. And I stayed the night with her, and then it was like, that was a significant moment in my life, because that was the first time that when opportunity met desire and I was on fire, that was the first time that I didn't give in to my desire to want to use drugs. And it was like I received so much power that day, and she played that significant role in help pulling me through that day. So she would definitely be one of the very many people who've had a huge impact on my recovery.
So I guess when adding new people that I guess push you in the right direction, I guess. I think I asked you this the first time, but do you have to? And you talked about this some too, but there's people obviously that you have to cut out of your life. And
yes, definitely. When I decided to pursue recovery and to pursue my walk of faith, I had to let go of everything and everyone that I had ever known. So that meant people who were really close to me, best friends, I had to let go of. I had to cut them out of my life. I had to cut that communication with them, sever those ties completely. Even with my marriage, even though that was an abusive, toxic marriage, I still was very much attached to him, and leaving him was very hard. But I knew that if I stayed with him, I could not continue on the path of recovery. So cutting him out of my life was really major, and I had to like block him. I had to block people from Facebook. I had to get a new phone number. And even my brother who overdosed and died, I had to cut most of my communication with him, quit hanging out with him, because he was using drugs. And when you're trying to pursue recovery, coming from a background like that, cutting out and avoiding old people, places, and things is major. It is huge. That is one of the reasons too why I would keep going back, because I would always go back to that familiar place or those familiar people. And even though I might not use that first week or first couple of days I was with them, eventually I would end up doing the same thing, because they were not taking the same path that I was.
Was there ever a point where you did overdose, or you almost overdosed, and I guess you probably came close to
Death?
But yeah, basically death.
Yeah. Actually, there was a time that I did overdose, and this was maybe 2014. And it was an opioid overdose. I was using heroin at the time. And what I remember about that day is I remember that I hadn't done any like big shots that day. And when I say shots, I mean like, dope. I just did mainly like washes, and washes are just like somebody doing a shot and you just getting what was left over. So not like a full-blown shot. And I remember all day, it was like I couldn't get enough dope in me to get well, to keep from being sick. And so finally, I got somebody to give me a good shot. And I remember whenever I took it, I remember standing up, and I remember everything just kind of like slowed down. And I remember saying, I felt that one. And then I remember sitting down, and then that's really all I remember until I woke up. And from what they told me, they said that I was sitting in the chair, and then they looked over and I was slouched over, and that I was non-responsive. And when they seen that I wasn't responding to them, they said that they pulled me out of the chair and laid me on the living room floor. And they said that my lips started to turn blue, and that's when I guess they proceeded to pick me up and take me to the shower. And then that's when they turned water on in the shower, and that's whenever I woke up. I just remember everything was black at first, and then it was a big blob, and then I saw like a big blonde blob. And as I became more fully awake, my vision got more clear. And then I seen a girl in front of me. And then I looked to my right. And then everybody that had been in the house was in the bathroom staring at me. My dad was there. Buku, like the whole bathroom was filled with people. And then I go back, and then I look down, and I'm completely naked. I overdosed. And came near death, and nobody called 911. I don't even think that was a thought for anybody. During that time, that was 2014, so a lot of people even still today are scared to call 911 when somebody overdoses, because they think they're going to get charged either with the death if they happen to die, or they're going to get charged with paraphernalia or other charges. A lot of people are on probation or parole, and if somebody calls the cops, then that means that somebody's probably liable for arrest. And so it's my assumption that a lot of those people that were there that day probably didn't call 911 because of fear. That makes me think about Narcan and naloxone, because nobody in my circle when I was using I never even heard of Narcan or naloxone, but that is the medication that reverses an opioid drug overdose. And the organization that I work for, we distribute that for free at no cost to those who are at high risk for overdose. So people who use drugs or people who might have a family or a loved one. And the medication is a lifesaver because it literally brings somebody back to life. And if somebody's overdosed, then you can administer the medication and it just tells their brain to breathe again. And it's actually nicknamed the Lazarus drug because it basically brings somebody back to life. So that's really important, I think, for anybody to have or carry, even if they're not a drug user, just because the opioids, like we mentioned before, it's very relevant topic today because it's affected pretty much everybody. You know, in 2017, over 72,000 Americans died from overdose, and it's preventable.
Like,
you know?
I guess early on, did you struggle with like relapse? Was there several times that you struggled with like relapsing or?
Well, before my recovery date's August 1st, 2016. So before that, where I talked about reinitiating my use, there was several times that I went back. Like whenever I had put my faith in Christ and I gained that momentum, it was November 2015 when I, without a shadow of a doubt, was for sure, okay, Jesus is who he says he is, and never like went back and took that back and, oh, never mind. It was that month, that year, that I finally decided, yes, Jesus is real, and I put my faith in him. And I knew that I wanted to pursue recovery and take that path. But for 9 months, I struggled with going back. And I can remember that December, I had a mixed drink and went to a bar for Christmas with some folks that were like family, right? And then January, my birthday came, and me and my mother went out for dinner, and we had a mixed drink because I can handle it, right? And alcohol wasn't the problem; it was just the opioids. And by February, I was hanging out with some guys every single weekend, riding four-wheelers, drinking. And then by March, I had went back to my husband, and I was back shooting the opioids, heroin and morphine and meth every single day. And then I went to rehab that April for 30 days. I come right back out and I did the same thing, and I got high again. I went back to my husband, and then he went to jail, and I did good for while he was in jail, and then he got out that July of 2016, and then I got high twice within that same week, almost 2 weeks. And then that last time was the last week of July, which is why my recovery date's August 1st. So,
I guess what would be your advice to someone that feels like they're alone basically and needs help?
I think what I would want them to know, well, what I would suggest, my advice would be obviously to seek out God and develop a relationship, because that's been the main thing that has held me. But find a community, because community is so important, and reach out to somebody. There's plenty of people in this world. There's help available. And what I would want them to know is that while addiction may be real, but so is recovery. It's possible, and any person can quit using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live.
Is there anything else that you think that I missed that you feel like you want to talk about? Or?
I have a blog, and if people want to find some hope or learn more about my experiences with faith, addiction, and recovery, They can find me at chastyking.com, CHASTYKING.com, and there's plenty of posts and videos on there where I talk about my testimony, my story, and things that I have went through. So that would be the only thing that I would add. Just check my blog out.